This morning, Bishop William Barber, joined by former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, kicked off the Poor People's Campaign March for Democracy in Georgetown, Texas, demanding federal action on voting rights, among other things. Over the next 4 days, the Selma to Montgomery-style voting rights march will make its way 27 miles across the state to Austin for a rally on Saturday at the state capitol. Now, the march comes 3 weeks into the Texas legislature's special suppression session. Democratic legislators who left the state to block Republican voter suppression bills are still right here in the nation's capital. Tomorrow, 3 of those Democrats will testify before the House Oversight Committee, making their case for the passage of federal voting rights legislation. I'm joined now by former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke and Bishop William Barber, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Congressman, I want to start with you here. A recent story that just broke with Donald Trump. The Washington Post reports that Trump repeatedly called his attorney at the time, Rosen, to push for his attorney general, I should say, the acting attorney general, push for probes of the 2020 election. And this was happening almost daily. I have to tell you, one of the challenges, I think, people attach this story to the big lie, and they say that's what fed into the voter suppression. A lot of us have been dealing with voter suppression for a long time, way before Trump. What do you expect this march to accomplish to help further move this struggle along?
I think a big reason that this march is happening in Texas is that you're absolutely right. Voter suppression existed long before this current attempt. In fact, Texas has become, over the years, the toughest state in the nation in which to vote. And as Bishop Barber has reminded us, that is connected to the fact that we still have a $7.25 an hour minimum wage, to the fact that we are the least insured state in the United States of America, and the fact that so many millions of Texans were eligible to vote in 2020 and yet could not very often because of those voter suppression obstacles placed in the way. And now there are new elections bills pending in Texas that we've got to stop. And we must pass the For the People Act in the United States Senate so that we roll back this voter suppression and affirmatively understand that every eligible American should have and will have the right to vote, participate in our democracy. So you're right, this preceded Trump, but we've got to get it right now, because what Trump helped to unleash during his presidency and the insurrection a little more than 6 months ago might very well consume this democracy unless we stand up and fight for it now.
Bishop Barber, I want to turn to you here. Adam Serwer recently wrote a piece in The Atlantic where he essentially says that Democratic lawmakers are betraying black voters, and many in the Democratic Party take black votes for granted because they believe that racism in the Republican Party gives those voters no viable alternative, essentially. Do you agree that Democrats are taking black voters for granted, especially because the White House has said, well, people will just out-organize voter suppression?
But what I believe is that this is not Jim Crow. This is James Crow Esquire. And when you look at these voter suppression bills across the country, they're going after everybody. Black folk, white folk, brown folk, Native, Asian people, the disabled, women. We got to look at what this is. Now, race is certainly there, but it's also connected to power and economics, because the same people that are suppressing the vote suppress living wages, suppress health care. So what Democrats have to decide, you ran on this and said you were going to do this. You said you were going to deal with voter suppression and racial voter suppression and deal with living wages as two things. We've already seen the filibuster block living wages. Now we see it blocking voting rights. We must have, into the filibuster, passing the real John Lewis bill, the For the People's Act that he wrote. The Voting Rights Act restoration hadn't even been written. When it's written, it needs to be passed, and $15 minimum wage. Otherwise, we are abandoning the infrastructure of the democracy. And to get an infrastructure bill that fixes bridges, but then you abandon the infrastructure of the democracy, which is voting, the bridge to all the other policies is backwards. And lastly, Tiffany, to do an infrastructure bill in your last segment with all white people in the room, right, and then try to make the voting issue just a black issue. No, it's not just a black issue. It's an American issue. And that's why you saw a diverse group of folk marching with us. And on Saturday, we'll show up in Austin with nationalizing Texas to say, pass these federal protections.
Congressman Bishop Barber makes legitimate points. You know, it's a diverse coalition of people fighting for this. But then I look at folks like Senator Manchin, who is a holdup on ending the filibuster, and who's been, you know, he and Sinema, quite frankly, have been holdups on some of these issues. Manchin was in your neck of the woods for a fundraiser hosted by some wealthy Republicans. You were in Congress. I mean, what should the expectation of the federal government be? And if you were given a private audience with Manchin, what would your advice to him be?
He wants to be on the right side of history. The people of the future are going to look back on those of us alive with the opportunity to do something about the erosion of voting rights and the very possible destruction of our democracy in 2021. I want them to be proud of us and the people that we are and the fight that we're waging and the victory that we will win if we stand together and use that political majority that Senator Manchin is part of in the United States Senate and pass, as Bishop Barber said, the full For the People Act, automatic voter registration, Election Day a national holiday, getting dark money out of our politics, and ending gerrymandering with independent redistricting commissions. This is really popular, especially in West Virginia. So let's get this thing passed and ensure that we have a democracy for our kids, for our grandkids, and the generations that follow. Only happens if Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema stick together with those other Senate Democrats and get this passed. And by the way, Tiffany, I think they could use a friendly push from the president. We saw in 1965, LBJ used every single political muscle in his being to get that across the line. We need that from President Biden right now.
Yeah, and before I turn it back to Bishop Barber, let me just ask you, Congressman, can the Democrats hold the House and the Senate if we leave the voter suppression tactics all across the country in place?
No.
No. Succinct answer. Bishop Barber, your thoughts? Because essentially it's folks like you who will be on the front lines leading some of these campaigns and, you know, voter engagement drives. Do you think that the Democrats can hold the power of the federal government if we leave things as status quo?
I question, can we even hold America? I mean, that's how serious this is, because the reality is Biden only won by 40,000 cumulative votes in 3 states. Now, he might have won popular vote by 7 million votes, but 40,000. No, you can't litigate your way out of this. I know in North Carolina it took us 4 years, and by the end of that, we had an unconstitutional constituted legislature. You can't mobilize your way out of this. You have to have federal protection. Like they marched from Selma to Montgomery, said we need federal protection. Today, we have to have federal action. And Manchin has got to decide whether he's going to run follow the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the U.S. Constitution. Now, he signed as a co-signer on this bill, but he did it when McConnell was in office. He knew it wouldn't come to the floor. So 79% of West Virginians are against where he is. 81% of Democrats in West Virginia, we marched on his office, black and white together from the hood to the holler, and they said, wait a minute, you're wrong on this. We got arrested at Sinema's office. It makes absolutely no sense that Democrats are doing this, and the president needs to come to Texas, come to Arizona, come to West Virginia, and then go to the well of the Congress like LBJ, Kennedy, Abraham Lincoln, and FDR, and make decisions.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're way out of time, but thank you so much, Congressman Beto O'Rourke and Bishop William Barber, for all the work that you're doing and for joining